You humans have hundreds of planets under your control, so why do you waste so many resources trying to make that Earth planet habitable? I genuinely don't understand. Finally, after all these years, after all the blood, sweat, and tears, after shipping in countless resources from the outer colonies, after playing dangerous and delicate games with trying to establish a new, precarious balance that had to be analyzed and updated every 6 months, after pouring the collected genius of humanity's greatest minds in every branch of science and engineering, after the most colossal coordination of effort humanity had ever attempted, we'd re-establish the ice caps. The hardest part was over. Now it was just the tedious effort, the massive expense, and the ever-lurking fear that we might do something to upset the balance again in our attempt to bring the planet back to life. It wasn't anywhere near finished. But we'd gotten it to a place where we could start. We couldn't evacuate everyone. Not by a long shot. No matter how hard we tried. There just weren't enough ships, not enough time. Billions died, and that's just counting the humans. Millions more tried in vain to establish underground complexes to save themselves, and one by one they failed. Maintenance had doomed them all, the supply chains were gone, and they couldn't establish self-sufficiency in time, before something critical failed. We didn't even try to save what had come to be known as charismatic macrofauna. The big, impressive, famous animals everyone knew and loved that depended on a complex ecosystem to survive. Lions and tigers and bears, oh my, had gone extinct, and would never roam the surface again. We took the hardy survivors with us, the animals that could always find an ecological niche to exploit. Rodents, insects, small birds, generally speaking, things people considered pests and vermin. They would be the first to colonize the planet, humanity would follow later. Much later, when we'd gotten it back into shape where a person could survive as well as a rat. It was time to bring down the orbital farms, the massive ships that we sent into orbit around the planet to preserve the plant life. Trees, domesticated crops, grasses, algae, and not technically plants, lichens and fungus, all waiting patiently for their chance to return. They would begin the process of re-establishing the drowned and ruined topsoil, pushing back the deserts, and bringing some semblance of a natural environment back to the broken and collapsing ruins of what were once sprawling, overcrowded cities. One question tugged at the back of my mind over and over again. When it was all done, when we'd brought the planet back from the wasteland we'd turned it into, 3 or 4 generations into the future, when we'd forgotten the monumental effort because no one still alive was there to see it, would we do it again? You humans have hundreds of planets under your control, so why do you waste so many resources trying to make that Earth planet habitable? I genuinely don't understand. Jim was a Glesian, in human language. His, and I use the pronoun loosely, he is at best, roughly analogous to male as we define it, race's name, star, and planet are not pronounceable by the human voice. Roughly humanoid in shape, roughly human-sized, they evolved from something like primates on their world as well, because it turns out that a bipedal stance and grasping, tree-climbing fingers evolve readily into tool-using hands. A stoic and pragmatic race, they prided themselves on logic and reason, and were always the first ones in the Federation to advocate for cutting your losses, for avoiding the sunk cost fallacy. There comes a time when, logically speaking, it's just not worth the effort anymore. The return on the investment would never be able to cover the cost, not even under the most optimistic projections. It was clear decades ago that this whole project, after dozens of iterations of the plan as we discovered how much more complicated and expensive the project would really be, would never turn a profit. This was a fool's errand, by any rational assessment. I struggled for a way to explain it to him in terms he could understand. Any way I looked at it, it made no sense to continue. We could leave at any time, turn our backs on the world we killed, learn from our mistakes and leave it as a monument to our hubris and irresponsible nature. Show our children and grandchildren pictures of this dead world, floating near lifeless in space, bacteria survived in pockets, but that was about it, and make them swear never to repeat the monumental blunders of their ancestors. Or we could fix it. Maybe not as good as new, maybe never to its former glory. But we could fix it. We could apologize. I turned to Jim, and explained it as concisely as I could. Because my mother gave it to me.